said, we want to create a game that brings back that nostalgia, that feeling of like, I can't go out tonight, or I can't, in that case, it was like, I'm not going to school, I'm going to chuck a sickie or whatever, because if I do, it means that that's a very Australian colloquialism.
Hey everybody, it's JP from Web3T. Very special guest today. Very excited to bring on Kieran Warwick from Illuvium. Illuvium is a crypto native game platform that is launching 3 standalone interoperable games in 2023. And Illuvium has managed to capture and maintain a steady drumbeat of hype that this game could be the breakthrough game for crypto in 2023. So I'm very excited to bring on Kieran. This is a big deal for me, big deal for the company, big deal for Kieran. I'm sure you've never been on a big podcast that gets 100 viewers a day. So here we are. And I don't know. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, JP. Very, very good. Thanks for having me on.
Where are you and what time is it there?
I'm in Sydney, and we just clocked midnight.
Nice. 8 a.m. here in New York City. A lot of questions to go through, and I think maybe the best place to start would be, what is Illuvium? Elevator pitch. What are you guys trying to build?
So it's the world's first AAA interoperable blockchain game, and AAA meaning very high budget, really experienced team, awesome high fidelity graphics, and in a nutshell, what it basically is it starts with a city builder. That's where you gather your resources. It's very similar to like SimCity or Simpsons Tapped Out, any of those sort of idle clicker games. And you can either play that free, or you can purchase a land plot. If you do have a land plot, then you gain access to resources that you can either take into the overworld, or you can sell them to other players who like to play in the overworld. And the overworld is our second game, and that's more like Pokemon, where it's an open world creature capturer, where you've got 7 beautiful regions that you can travel around. You harvest things like plants, you forge weapons and armor, and you're basically trying to build the strongest team you can of these creatures that we call alluvials. And the reason is you want to take them into our third game, which is Illuvium Arena, which is the game that I'm most excited about. It's an auto battler, so it's highly strategic, super competitive. It's got a lot of replayability. They've got 30 million players that are active each month, and that's who we're trying to compete with.
There's a lot of games out there, right? Like you're on Twitter, you're on Discord. You can eyeball 10 games that are kind of out there. I'm just making up a number, but there's not 30, right? There's not 30. There's more than 5, and there's not 30. So there's a couple games out there that are kind of maybe had a big year in 2021. Maybe say they're going to have a big year this year. What makes Illuvium different than these games that are out there?
So I would define all of the games that have been playable and released and are in at least open beta form to be more like in mainstream, we'd call them indie games. So, not such high fidelity graphics. There hasn't been as much lore built into it. The storylines, the ability for to get into repetitive gameplay loops, which speaks to replayability. All of those things haven't been what I would say up to scratch with like a mainstream AAA game, like a Fortnite or a Call of Duty, Need for Speed. When you look at some of the racing games, there's just not as much substance and depth there. And the reason is it takes a long time to build a game of the quality that we're going for. It takes a lot of money, and it takes a really experienced team to be able to deliver that.
This is your first video game project, right? Why do you think that you can be the person that solves this problem? Is it your team, or is it your vision and how are you going to do this?
So it starts with the 3 brothers that created this. We all have a very unique skill set, and that allowed us to essentially unlock the ability to recruit a team of experts. So Grant is an extremely good artist. He's been in the CGI industry for 10 plus years, one of the best modelers in the world. He brought a very, very strong art team, and he was relentless. He's our art director. He was able to recruit probably our first 10, 15 artists at seriously expert levels, where we got them from Blizzard, and we got them from Riot, and all of these AAA studios that have an extreme amount of experience. And so that's why you see such high fidelity art. And then you've got my other brother, my second oldest brother, who
Should we get his name?
there's so many of them, Aaron, who is freakishly smart. He's extremely good at game design, and he was able to really just share his vision of the game and how he wanted it to all fit together and be interoperable, and how we would make this a world's first for gamers. And then from my side of things, I'm the guy who's just driving it forward from a business standpoint. And I was able to get us a huge amount of partnerships and connections and capital. And so we all sort of bring this different skill set that I believe is required to get us into this position. And we're also, because we're brothers, we're highly competitive with each other. So we work stupid hours, and all of that sort of essence, it drips down into the rest of our team. And then we probably got 30 guys that are like our real hardcore guys that have been with us since the beginning, that provide another platform, and then it drips down from there. But that's pretty much it, right? It's a very flat structure that we work with.
What's interesting too is that there's another pair of brothers down on the other side of the globe, in New Zealand, right? Like, I wonder, the McDonald brothers, right? They do the Futureverse guys. So that's a funny story.
Yes, yeah, I know those guys well.
Aaron and Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I don't know if there's 3, but there's at least 2.
Yeah, I think there is 3, not 4 though.
Is it 3?
I think so. Yeah.
What's going on down there? There's been a disconnect between, I feel like, promises and deliveries in this kind of ecosystem. Can you talk about that at all? Like, why has that happened? Or you kind of aware of that? What are we doing about
it? So I think there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first is the promise of a timeline and missing that. And we have fallen victim to that, where I was extremely ambitious when we first started. And obviously our scope increased tremendously over the course of the last 2 years, but we were definitely a little bit naive in what we could achieve. And I always try and look back and look inwards and say, why did that happen, right? Like, was I crazy? Was I just totally ill-informed, or I just had no idea of our capability? But I think the biggest driver of that, and not to make any excuses or anything like that, because I think this affects the entire ecosystem, and it's very unique to crypto. When you're transparent, and when you have so many retail investors that jump in to your project at such an early stage, you're constantly answering to thousands of people, and the expectations go up. It's not like a Blizzard or a Sony or any of these larger corporations, which are able to build in stealth, and they don't have people knocking on their door saying, hey, you said this would be ready, so where is it? And you're like, well, it'll just be out next month, I promise, just to get them to, you're just kicking the can down the road so they don't come and knock on the door again. I think that ties into it a little bit inside the whole ecosystem. But then you've got this we're going to change the world with our games and utilizing this technology and all this kind of narrative that a lot of projects will preach. And the issue with that is that blockchain just enhances your gaming experience. Yes, you can earn a little bit of money. Yes, you have ownership of assets. Yes, there are real world economies which can be manipulated by the players, and you have things like governance, which makes it super interesting, where you can dictate different changes to the economy and stuff like that. But it's not going to completely change the way that gamers experience playing different titles, right? Like, it's just going to make it a little bit better here, a little bit better here, a little bit better here. And if you add it all up, you're going to have a better experience. But the problem that a lot of these studios have is they say this is going to be the craziest thing that you've ever seen and you're going to experience. And so they've put their expectations so high on their audience that when it gets delivered, even if they've done a good job, people out there are like, well, this isn't that much better, and people can start picking it apart. So I think we need to start changing that narrative to just saying this is going to enhance your gaming experience, not just blow it out of the water to the point where you don't even know what you're doing anymore.
When I think about metaverse, where it is now is nothing's connected, right? And where it is in 50 years is everything is connected. And I kind of see Illuvium as a middle ground between that, where you're building a set of interconnected things. Are you thinking about connecting outside your ecosystem right now, or are you just totally focused on yourself?
Totally focused on ourselves. And this is again where I say, like, the sell to consumers, to gamers out there, it needs to be inside of a construct that is possible, right? And it's just unfortunately not possible for us to have games that are cross-chain, utilizing the same assets with different platforms where the assets are created, with different graphic standards and all of these different things. That isn't possible. Now, will it be in 10, 15, 20 years? I 100%, I definitely believe that, but it's just not possible now. But that's okay, because right now in traditional mainstream games, that's not possible, right? You can't go and take a character out of one Nintendo game and just slot it into another Nintendo game made by the same publisher. It's just not possible, right? But in our game, you can go and take fuel from Illuvium Zero, and you can either sell it, which is a cool feature, or you can go and use it in the overworld, so you can go and travel. So effectively, you're making your travel and your fusing and your collecting free, and you're using an NFT out of one game and you're bringing it into another. Similarly, you catch an alluvial inside the overworld. You don't just live in that overworld like in Pokemon. You can go to another game in TFT, like similar to Teamfight Tactics, which is our arena, and start playing, just utilizing that exact same asset. There's no additional downloads needed. That is groundbreaking in terms of, or in my eyes anyway, in terms of the gaming experience.
I completely agree. And then in the blog, I equated it to, okay, like, let's say you're playing Mario World and you're running around collecting things, and then a completely different game, Mario Kart, that's going to affect how fast your character goes. If you collect XYZ in Mario World, you're going to be able to take your character, and then if you're playing as Yoshi, then Yoshi's going to be faster or whatever. And in previous conversations, you really got into the weeds about how you're building that kind of features into the game with like a 10, 15-year time horizon, right? So talk about that a little bit. I think that's really interesting to think about how long your time horizon is. And obviously, you're not fleshing out project plans 10 years from now, but interoperability, how there's going to, not necessarily a season or a battle pass is how we think about it now, but something that's great now, maybe it's not great next year. Something that is terrible now that nobody's collecting, you might want to collect it because coming down the line, it could potentially be very important. So, spin it up about that, would you?
Yeah. So if we take the example of the sets that we have in the overworld, you might decide that the most powerful characters or the most sought after because they're more effective in the arena are fire characters, for example, right? And we have these really strong characters inside the first set, and then after that set is complete, you are stuck with your whatever you've caught, unless you want to go and buy them off other players in the marketplace. Now, set 2 comes out, and all of a sudden the meta changes, and it's not so much about fire characters, it's all about air characters, and they're really, really hard to get. There's not as many, they're more powerful, you can create better combinations with them, but there was tons of them in the first set, and everyone just went out there and said, nah, I don't want to capture them. That's how we create increases in the marketplace for these assets, because then all of a sudden the guys that were smart enough to go and capture those air alluvials, they're saying, well, it might take you 6 months to go and capture that tier 5 air alluvial in the second set, but I've got one sitting right here that is going to make your composition in the arena so much stronger, but it's going to cost you a chunk of money because I know that I'm one of the only people in the world that has it. So that's a really interesting concept. And then taking that further, you go, okay, perhaps in 5 years from now, we're going to have a dungeon crawler. One of the games that we grew up playing, super, super basic, like literally the worst graphics you've ever seen, was Angband. And we want to create a modern version of that. And let's say a character that isn't that strong inside of the arena, but then 5 years from now, you hold on to that character, and then inside of this new game, this new dungeon crawler, it's super powerful, and it just turns out that you can make a huge amount of compositions with that, and your team is stronger. That's what we're talking about when we say interoperable.
Okay, so you have a vision, right? Like you have a grand vision of creating a AAA game that is utilizing blockchain technology to enhance the gameplay experience. That's your vision, but the game's got to be good. Who do you see as your competitor? Like, who are you competing with? Are you competing with crypto games, or are you competing with League of Legends? You know, how do you think about that?
There are obviously a few players. I love investing in the space as well. I've made probably 10 or 15 placements in teams that I would say have the capability of producing AAA games, really that can compete with mainstream. But at the outset, the games that we've created are games that we love to play. And there was no games that we like to play in Web3s. So if I'm being completely honest with you, and I'm not bypassing Web3 as a whole, I would say Pokemon is what we're competing with. Grant and I, we grew up playing Pokemon. It's one of our favorite games to play, and we just love the capturing and just finding the different Pokemon that really speak to us. And so at the outset, we said we want to create a game that brings back that nostalgia, that feeling of like, I can't go out tonight, or I can't, in that case, it was like, I'm not going to school, I'm going to chuck a sickie or whatever, because if I do, it means that that's a very Australian colloquialism. But yeah, if we could create that, then we potentially unlock this new type of collection game that truly does compete with Pokemon. So that was on one side. And then Aaron was like, look, I miss that. And to be honest, Pokemon's lame. So I would rather go after Riot in terms of League of Legends and Teamfight Tactics. I was also all for that. I'm a huge Teamfight Tactics fan myself. So they are our main competitors, right? And then if you look at Illuvium Zero, that's going to turn into a game similar to Clash of Clans. And I think if we don't set that bar at that level, then we're going to fall short, because these other studios, as soon as someone, even if we do a good job, it's going to be enough to turn the light switch on or give the green light, because there's a lot of these studios that already are building blockchain
That was my next question, and the lead in is like, okay, what's going to take for Pokemon to launch their NFT collection? Is it you guys doing a good job, or are they going to do it before you? You know what I mean? Like, there's this. I feel like the people at Nintendo and
Mhm.
Riot's already working on it. Epic's doing this stuff. Like, they're building out. They're investigating. The people who play these games are very into this stuff, right? It's not like I feel like the gamers themselves are not into it because they think it's another DLC or another microtransaction. Then they have this like resistance. But as we saw with the Reddit NFT thing, like all you have to do is kind of tweak the wording a little bit, make everybody feel a little bit nicer. These aren't NFTs; these are just collectibles. And then somebody buys it for $1, and then it's worth $500, and they're like, "Whoa, what is this? I can sell this." And then they're in the NFT game, So it the gamers are just they have their heads in the sand right now.
They're being directed by their favorite publishers, right? Like this backlash, I think, comes from. I think where it all stems from, and I've spoken about this a little bit publicly, is we're directing funds. It all starts with VCs, right? Like they're the ones who fund games and studios. Unless you're one of like the big 5 or 6, then you need funding for each game that you decide to build. And even indie games out there that might not make a ton of money, that gives you the opportunity to just fund it yourself when you want to do your next game. Some of those games still have 500,000 people that are diehards, right? You might not see it in the news or anything like that, but they'll tell you this is my favorite game. And you get enough of those indie publishers and even some of like the AAAs that are out there that are really, really close. And they look to say, hey, we're going to build an expansion, or we're going to build a new game that has similar mechanics. And all of a sudden, the funding is dried up in Web 2, in mainstream gaming, and they think, where is all the money gone? And then they look across over the pond over here, and you've got these guys who have never built a video game before. They've got 6 people in their team, and they say that they're going to build a AAA game. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter what you called it, right? Like whether it was NFTs or something else, they're going to look at that and say, absolutely not. Now, if they looked over the pond and all of a sudden they saw games that were just as good as mainstream, regardless again of ownership or whatever, they would say, I might go and check it out, right? Let's see what this game is all about. But that doesn't exist. So you're getting this huge amount of resistance because they're saying those games are shit. And these VCs are backing this technology. They're not wrong in backing NFTs and blockchain gaming. They just have to throw their funds somewhere, and they're hoping they catch the first big game. They're shifting, right? And I think, give it 10, 15 years, that most studios will be forced to shift towards blockchain gaming. I truly believe that. And VCs believe that through and through. And they don't have that same emotional connection. They're just like, if we get in here early, we're going to catch one of these big games that ends up being the next Riot. And so you've got this big conundrum here where all of this money is shifted, and these publishers are going to their million plus people in their communities, and they're saying, hey, stop NFTs in games. They're bad. They're terrible games. And they're Ponzi's and all this kind of stuff. I don't blame them, right? If I wasn't in this space and someone was telling me to go play that game that blew up in 2021, I would be like, no, absolutely not. That's absurd. I'm not going back 20 years. So that's, I think that's where it all stems from. But the minute they find a really good game, they're just going to go and play it, right? And that's where you say, like, it's got to just be fun. Then they'll start experiencing, oh my God, like the Reddit people did, oh, it's a collectible, and now I can sell it for $500. Once that penny drops for all of these gamers, they're not going to go back. It's just, it's absurd to think so.
Devil's advocate here, right? Like, so esports, 2016 to 2018, a ton of VC money and private equity money went into esports teams specifically, right? This is going to be a new business model. These companies are going to blah, blah, blah. They're going to make a lot of money and they're going to create, we're going to fill up the giant stadium with a bunch of people, which they have done in some games. But after the, wave of investments, all the teams kind of realized it's very hard to become profitable. And everybody shifted to selling t-shirts and, and basically, becoming a merchandise store and then really leaning on the influencers. So I'm wondering, I guess there's an argument that, well, maybe it doesn't pan out like that. Just because the VC money's flowing in there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to play out like that, because not every, all the VC bets aren't always right? So do you have any opinions about esports? Like, do you have anything to say about, if we could look at esports as an example of bad, a bad turnout for investors who bought at the top, right? Like,
Totally, absolutely. And I think, there are a bunch of VCs that went into blockchain games at the top where, there were a few early ones and they made a ton of money. And then there are a whole bunch of followers that bought at the top of the bull market a year ago now. And they're sitting there going, oh my God, why didn't we put our money back in Web 2? But I think it's fundamentally different in the sense that they're still investing in games, right? Like shifting to esports and trying to, like, I feel like that's a bit of a Hail Mary versus, okay, let's look at what we're fundamentally investing in. This is a game and this is a game, except this game over here is using new technology. It's community driven, which gamers absolutely love. There's ownership in it, which you can see trends in multiple games over the past 20, 30 years that people want that, and this technology enables that. And then there's this compelling case where, hey, you can potentially create an economy which, if you get it right, is sustainable and people can actually earn. And I'm not going to sit here and say change your life and you won't have to work again because you're earning inside of a game. But these are some pretty compelling points when you couple it with, and they're just as good and they are just as quality as traditional games. Like, it's not that hard of a sell versus sort of, hey, let's just, esports is going to take over the world. Let's not invest in games. Let's just invest in teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that answer. You're investing in games still, not, because it's a completely different thing, right? And you really have to explain to people who don't know anything about it. Look, let's split it out. Games, and then if you look at esports, it's like this big, and you look at the gaming market, it's like huge. So I agree with you. That was a good answer. So are you guys looking to get bought out by Activision or Riot or Epic or something like that?
No. Typically, if you ask me that question in any of the other companies that I've ran, I would say to you, yes. In my last food tech company, did we want to get bought out by a DoorDash or an Uber Eats? Absolutely, right? But I think the opportunity here is even greater, right? Like, this is the breaking model, like the shared economy was and did so much damage to traditional businesses. We feel like we're at the forefront of a changing market in terms of gaming in general. And so we believe if we do this right, that in 10 years, we'll be buying out gaming studios like, you see Uber doing now. Their acquisitions are just out of control. We feel like we can get in that position, and we've already surpassed our wildest dreams, what we thought we could earn and make out of this. And so it's not about the money anymore, right? And it never really was. Like, we've said since we were 4 or 5 years old that all four of us want to create a gaming studio because we loved gaming so much. But obviously, from my perspective, I want to earn money and stuff like that. But that's all in the past. We're well past that. And now it's about, honestly, like, a legacy.
That's awesome. It's a good answer. Are you familiar with Jerry Springer, the American daytime TV show?
Yeah.
So, at the end of Jerry Springer, he says a final thought. And I was just, wondering if you had a final thought to share any kind of takeaways that you want everybody to kind of know about or think about, to leave us with.
Yeah, so I mean, I always say if you're having doubts and you're negative about NFTs or blockchain or whatever, I don't blame you, right? Like I actually agree with you. I think it makes sense for you to have your doubts now, but just be open to the fact that if you took away some of these NFT games that are being built, and I'm not just saying Illuvium, but some of these games that are being built, if you took away the NFTs and the on-chain elements and all of this kind of stuff, would you play them, right? Because what people don't realize is a lot of us are building in free to play. So you don't need a wallet, you don't need anything, and you can just come and play our games. And I guarantee you'll start having fun. So just be open to the fact that not all of us are trying to cash grab and make money off you. We're just trying to simply give you a better experience in your gaming, and just be open to it. And I think the next 4 or 5 years is going to be pretty interesting.
Awesome. Well, Kieran, I really appreciate you being here. I had a great time talking to you, and hope you have a great night.
Morning now. Thanks, JP.